We shall move on to the third session. For the third plenary session, I request Dr. Muhammad Ali, Head in Charge Shift 2, to introduce the resource person, Dr. S. Karthik Kumar, Associate Professor of English, Annamalai University.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome the last and third plenary session. Resource person Dr. Karthik Kumar, Associate Professor of English, Annamalai University. The Annamalai University is the second oldest university in South India. And Professor Karthik Kumar, as an associate professor, he has 19 plus years of teaching and research experience. He specializes in post-colonial studies and eco-studies. He has guided 23 MPhil research scholars and 13 PhD research scholars. He has also attended 42 national conferences and 17 international conferences, and has also conducted 2 national conferences by himself and 6 seminars and a workshop. Apart from that, he has 2 major projects to his credit, which one he has completed already, a major project of rupees 5,37,000, and he is rightly conducting another project. He has a vast experience of 19 years of teaching and research experience with full dedication and devotion. Dr. Karthik Kumar has published a national journal, published a paper in National Journal called Rock Pebbles, volume July-December 2006. He has substantial 72 research papers in international journal publications to his credit till date. He has so far published 6 books and has 15 popular articles published. He is part of Annamalai University Alumni Association and a prestigious member of Indian Association for Canadian Studies. Though the research person has specialized in post-colonial studies and eco-studies, he has traversed many genres and topics very incisively by his research output, namely transcultural studies, gender and identity, diaspora studies, existential studies, literature in collaborative classroom, collaborative studies, post-structural aesthetics, neuro-linguistic programming, subalternity, race and class, multiculturalism, post-human apocalypse, socialism versus capitalism, Indian writing in English, feminism, language games in communicative language teaching, mythology, text and discourse, science fiction in depiction of technology, English for science and technology, eco-criticism, ecofeminism, marginalized literature, Anglo-Indian fiction. So the list goes on. So his doctrine has been publish or perish, I suppose. So with a quick span of 2 decades, professor with a dedicated and devoted research writing, he has guided a lot of students. And to tell you, his 6 books that he has published, American Literary Movements, Reappraisal is one of the books that he has published, and Paul Scott's Vision of India is another book. Voices of Marginalized is his 3rd book. Emergency Trends in Indian English Literature. Then Green Thoughts, Essays on Eco Literature, and finally Anglo-Indian Fiction, a survey. So we have for our 3rd plenary session a very prolific, very dedicated research guide amidst us, so which with much ado about with the much ado about, with his volume of research writings, I would like to welcome this passionate researcher. Let us hear his incisive, deep cultural outpour of knowledge. With these few words, I welcome you, sir, and the session is yours. Thank you very much.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Hope I'm audible. Happy to meet you all. Virtually happy to be part of this event, a virtual seminar on cultural representations, jointly organized by the New College, Chennai, and Alpha Research Academy. I feel privileged for having been given this opportunity to share some of my views on eco studies or eco literature, which is always dear to me. Since the seminar happens to be related to literature, I thought I could relate nature and culture, and I have given the title Nature versus Culture, which is one of the topics on which much heated discussions are going on among the eco-critics themselves, and the eco-critics on the one hand, and the other theorists on the other hand. So I think I can relate my talk to the theme of the seminar that way. And I must also thank for having introduced me in that nice manner. Actually, I was reminded of one fact from the introduction. A person who has specialized in too many things has not specialized in anything. So I think I have to groom myself better. So anyway, thank you all. So in about an hour, I would like to address on the topic nature versus culture. I will try to explain some of the key terms which are in parlance in eco-criticism as well as in other literary theories, which would be useful for our further course or further study in literature as well as literary theory. First of all, let us come to terms with eco studies or eco-criticism or eco-literature, whatever it is called. Actually, literature is about everything under the sun. Literature and environment, or literature and ecology, is not something new. Of course, the genre which we today call eco-criticism had its beginning in the 80s or the 90s of the 20th century. But for ages, we can find an interconnectedness or an interdependency between literature and environment. In fact, classical works and classical authors, they drew influence from nature and they found themselves part of nature. They could not escape from nature. Whatever they put forward in their writings, they chose to write, or they chose to sing, they chose to portray everything about human life from a point of view that was natural. So, though this term eco-criticism is comparatively new, the relationship between literature and nature goes back to centuries. In fact, it goes back to the very beginning of human civilization, or the very beginning of literature itself. But today, owing to the environmental threats that we are facing on a large scale today, it has become a topic of discussion. It has become a very popular genre or popular topic because of the environmental crisis that we are facing today. So eco-criticism is not simply about the environmental threats that we are facing because of our carelessness or because of our attitude towards nature or environment. It is more than that. It is not because that we suffer from environmental crisis that we have to return to nature. I hope I reach you today. We speak a lot about nature. We speak a lot about the environmental crisis, the global warming, and a number of other things. This is because of the immediate threats that we are facing today from the environment. But the relationship between humanity and nature should not be simply because of these threats. Take, for example, the classical authors who wrote centuries back, even when there was no apparent threat from the environment, because there was no damage done to the environment then, even then, they had felt their indebtedness to the environment. And they chose to draw influence from nature. So what we have to understand is the relationship between humanity and the environment is something spiritual and it is something eternal. It's not something new. So keeping this in mind, we have to further get into the genre eco-criticism to explore how we have changed our attitudes towards nature, towards environment over the centuries, for which we need to define or we have to come to terms with the two key terms that we are using for the discussion today, that is nature and culture. Nature can be defined in a number of ways. Nature can mean different things or different concepts to different people. In the same way, culture has also been defined in many ways. Ever since the beginning of the 20th century, ever since, to be very precise, from the advent of structuralism or other postmodern theories, the belief in the language system has been repudiated. We don't find language to be an authentic medium through which we can share our ideas or our thoughts. It was believed so before structuralism or other postmodern theories came into existence. But these modern theories, the postmodern theories, questioned the very nature of language and the validity of language. So today, language, we have come to suspect language. We have come to believe in the instability of language. So that's why we have to, for a while, we have to escape from the influences of these. I don't belittle these theories, please understand me, because this is a key issue in eco-criticism. Eco-criticism questions many of the assumptions which these theories make. One of the assumptions which eco-criticism questions is the ability of language as a medium of expression, because I will explain. We will see everything in the course of the lecture. So let's come back to nature and culture. So nature can be seen from a number of points of view in a number of ways. Obviously, when we think of nature, we understand nature in terms of wilderness, ocean, large mountains. So nature recalls these to our mind. Sometimes we use nature in this sense. It is not human nature, for example, we say. So then we talk about our attitude, our original uncontaminated attitude is also referred to as nature. Nature is also used to refer to anything that we see around ourselves. That is also a way in which we use the word nature. But for the purpose of today's discussion, let's arrive at a convenient definition for the word nature. Nature is everything. It includes us too. We are also part of nature. Anything in this planet is part of nature, including humanity. But why we estrange ourselves from nature? When we think of nature, we think of nature as something other within double quotes. We think of nature as the other. We exclude ourselves from nature. We don't think ourselves as part of nature, and we find everything else as part of nature, but we don't consider ourselves part of nature. So this is because of the influence of culture. This is because of the faculty called mind. So that is the crux of the argument today. Because we have the ability to think, we think everything from our point of view. Okay? We think that we are the center of the universe. We think that we can think about everything in this world. We think that we know about everything else in this world. As a result, when we think of something, especially when we think of nature, we tend to exclude ourselves and we estrange ourselves from nature. So this is because of our ability to think or our ability to know, K-N-O-W, know. This is where the mind influences. As long as we were innocent children, we could identify ourselves part of nature. But once we started developing this faculty called mind, we started distancing ourselves from the environment, and we began to perceive the environment as the other. So herein lies the root cause for most of the environmental problems, or the most of the problems in our relationship with the environment that we are facing today. We don't think that we are part of the nature. We don't think that we are part of the planet. We exclude ourselves or we estrange ourselves from everything. Whereas in the planet, everything is interconnected. Everything is connected with the other. Nothing can be isolated from one another. So then, what is culture? Actually, the word culture is, because you're all informed students, but I don't underestimate your knowledge. The why I am trying to talk about all these elementary things is to pave a platform on which we can discuss some more important things in a comfortable manner. So don't mistake me that I am trying to say something very rudimentary. This is very essential for our further discussion. So what is culture? Culture, is derived from the verb cultivate, and we have cultivated a lot of habits over these years, over these centuries of human civilization. And historians identify three major phases in the history of human civilization or human culture. The first one was the agrarian culture, and the second one was the industrial culture. And today we are living in postmodern or the postmodern culture. Agrarian culture, no, it lasted up to the middle of the 17th or 18th century, when agriculture was the major predominant profession, and people depended by and large on agriculture, and everything was in tandem with the environment, and people lived in harmony with nature. And then came the industrial revolution by the middle of the 18th century. So industries and factories came into existence. Science emerged as a rival to arts and humanities, and people started moving to places where industries were established. Cities came into existence, urbanization started taking place, and people were weaned from the agricultural professions, and industrial culture came into existence. Machines came into existence, and machines were invented, and people became used to the repetitive industrial culture. And by the last decade of the 20th century, the 1980s or the 1990s, thanks to the advent of the internet, another culture, we drifted into the third culture, that is the internet culture or the postmodern culture, where even the home has become the office. We are slowly cut off from the rest of the world. We are connected to the rest of the world only through the gadgets, and the interpersonal relationship or the relationship between humanity on the one hand and the environment on the other hand has been challenged. We have become callous to what is happening outside because we are immersed in we are immersed in virtual reality. So we are not in terms with reality. We believe in virtual reality, and we take for granted that virtual reality is more relevant than reality itself. So this is the brief history of culture, human culture over these centuries. So now, so on the one hand we have nature, on the other hand we have culture. How culture has caused a damage to our relationship to nature. So this is the question. Now let me share some of the screens. I have some. Yeah. Okay, sir. So we are not going to concentrate on all the slides. So we were talking about the perceptual difference between eco studies and eco criticism and green studies. Green studies is a popular term with the British practitioners of eco criticism, and while the Americans prefer to use eco criticism, and there is history, so you can make use of it. Now we come to the major topic of our discussion. That's somewhere in one of the slides entitled "The Nature versus Culture." So I have listed a few terms there. Yeah, nature versus culture, probably the next one. Yeah, nature versus culture. So if we try to explain all these terms, probably we will have a better understanding of the conflict between nature and culture. So you find some terms on the left in green, and you can also find some terms on the right in red, and they are always used as antonyms. Okay, in critical as well as cultural conversations, we use these terms as antithetical. Hope you would agree with me. For example, intuition is regarded as something opposite to reason. Rural is set against urban. Emotion is considered an opposite to intellect. Likewise, the terms on the left and the terms on the right are considered antithetical. So the terms on the left, intuition, rural, emotion, non-human reality, woman, sex, they are related to nature, whereas the terms we find in on the right are terms which are related to culture. So see, for example, intuition is nowadays not regarded as a valid means of experience or a valid means of knowing. Okay, usually we regard the animals to be intuitive. We regard tribals or the rustics to be intuitive. When you want to show off yourself as cultured or civilized, you should shun intuition and you should use reason. So this is what culture has taught us. Am I right? Intuition is supposed to be the characteristic of a primitive. Intuition is supposed to be the characteristic of a woman. A man is not expected to be intuitive. A man is expected to possess a reason and he has to apply reason to whatever he does. Okay, and if you want to show yourself as somebody cultured or civilized or educated for that matter, you should use reason. You should shun. You should okay, avoid intuition. So this is what we have been taught. This is what culture has taught. Okay, because intuition is closely related to nature, but you have to verify. It's good that we should possess reason. We should use reason. Does it mean that we should uh, shun intuition? So intuition is also as valid, as trustworthy, as reliable as reason. Uh, the tribals are good examples for that. They are also surviving in this planet. In fact, they are leading a better quality of life, better kind of life than what we cultured people do. So towards the end of the discussion, I would like to read a poem by Eddie Hope. Australia is the title of the poem, in which we will come to know how these terms are used by us in our everyday conversation. So intuition is supposed to be primitive. Reason is supposed to be the trait of civilization. So this divide has been established by culture. So this is where culture comes into question. Culture, in the name of culture, we have been trained in such a way that we we tend to disown intuition and we tend to promote reason. In the same way, rural-urban divide. So we always tend to look down upon something rural. Of course, our perception is slowly changing nowadays, but some 20 years back, if somebody is said to be rural, okay, it's a thing, it's a stigma. Okay, rural is not something used to prize somebody. Rural goes with uneducated, rural goes with uncivilized, rural goes with undeveloped, like that. Whereas urban, okay, stands for education, educated, stands for civilized, cultured, all these things. In the same way, look at all these terms. Emotion, okay, so emotion is curbed, whereas intellect is entertained today by our culture, by the popular culture that we enjoy today. Non-human, human. when we think of the world, we don't think in terms of every creature in the world. We think only in terms of human civilization. I hope you would agree with me if you uh, consider this term non-human or human. You can come to know when we, for example, when we say that uh, we are suffering and the world is suffering. We by world we do not mean every species or every life force. We simply mean ourselves. Am I right? So we think that the planet is inhabited only with human population. We have to remember that the planet is also populated with a number of species to which we owe our existence. That is more important. They may not be uh, directly related to us, but every species in this planet contributes to the existence or the survival of the planet. Okay, so in fact, there is a popular saying in eco-criticism that the world can survive, the planet can survive without human civilization, but humanity cannot survive without the other species. Okay, but somehow we from this is called anthropocentrism. Okay, we consider ourselves the center of everything. We consider ourselves the center of the planet, and we believe that we are the supreme creatures on the planet, and we also believe that everything else in this world is there only for our benefit. So this tendency has struck roots very deeply in our mind, in our attitude. So this has been sustained by the by culture. Okay, so this is where we have to understand how culture has blinded our eyes, how culture has blended our senses. Okay, so likewise, reality versus perception. So this is perception is a very popular term with the theorists. Okay, this is why eco-criticism as a theory is in conflict with the other major theories of the 20th century. While the other major theories believes in perception, they do not believe in reality. They simply believe in perception. They, in fact, any theory for that matter, for example, structuralism or post-structural or postmodernism, they do not believe in absolutes. They do not believe in a center. They believe that the world is okay. The world cannot be understood in terms of absolutes. Okay, the reality cannot be understood. There is no reality, for example, they say, and we perceive our reality. So that is not the reality of the world. That is we develop our sense of the reality. That is our perception. Perception differs from person to person, nation to nation, from one gender to another. So these are all the issues which are widely discussed in the theories. But eco-criticism, on the other hand, strongly believes in a reality. Reality is not something that escapes our sense of understanding. It is there beyond ourselves. There is a world beyond ourselves. We try to look at everything within our mind. Okay, the world outside we try to conceive in our mind. So that's where perception comes into question. Whereas reality is the state where our ideas, our opinions, our attitude, our mind does not intervene. So there is a world which is beyond our perception. There is a world, for example, they ask the question, if we are talking about the global warming today, okay, it's a reality, it's a hard reality. We cannot simply escape that it is only a perception. Okay, in other theories, we can say that it's only a perception. It's an abstract thing, but eco-criticism deals with the concrete reality. So first of all, we have to come to terms with the fact that there is a reality, and we have to come to terms with a reality. But culture has made us believe not in reality, has made us believe in perception. Okay, so in same way, woman versus man. Woman is supposed to be closer to nature, and man is an epitome of everything that is characteristic of an educated or civilized or cultured. In the same way, we have to distinguish between sex and gender. Sex is biological, whereas gender is a construct. Okay, so this is gender is a construct. It's a social or cultural construct. It is constructed by culture. So here we can understand the difference between nature and culture, or how culture has influenced our understanding of nature. So gender and sex. Sex is there are differences between a man and a woman. Okay, biological differences are there, but culture has also constructed an image of a woman and an image of a man. Okay, a man is supposed to be brave. A man is supposed to be okay, brave, bold. He's supposed to be outwardly. He's supposed to be okay, frank in his attitude. Whereas uh, culture has made women to be it expects a woman to behave in an intuitive manner. A woman, of course, things are changing, but by and large, we have this attitude when a man cries, when a man weeps, the world laughs at him. Whereas a woman, when a woman cries, there is nothing wrong about it. The world considers. So culture has influenced our attitude. So this is what we have to understand. Nature is reality. Nature is there, and when we try to come to terms with nature, culture intervenes. Culture intervenes. Culture has influenced through various means. Our education, okay, our the way in which we have been brought up in the society, the social influences. All these things have made a tremendous impact on our understanding, our attitude towards the world around us. As a result, that we have come far away from nature. We have distanced ourselves from nature, and we think of nature as something as the other. So this is where we have to understand that we are also part of nature. If something happens to nature, it happens to us. Okay, the threat is not simply to the environment. We have to understand the influence that we have derived from nature. So this is the point I was trying to drive home. So culture is a force. It's an unseen or invisible force that always has a tremendous influence upon our way of looking at things around us, including nature. So we cannot simply escape that everything is only relative, or everything is only a perception. Okay, we have to believe that there is a reality, and we have to believe in that reality. We have to come to terms with that reality, and we must try to establish a kind of relationship with that reality. If I don't mean to say that culture is false, but what we have learned in the name of culture, we have to introspect. So this is the point I would like to drive home. So culture is inescapable. It has its influence on us always. But the purpose of education is to come out of the false influences that we have, we have accumulated over these years. So eco-criticism is one way in which we can try to understand who we are and how we are related to the environment in the right perspective. Okay, so while the other theories believe in the abstract discussion of the world in a very abstract manner, eco-criticism tries to face the reality in a very realistic point of view, and it works on the grounds of reality. So this is what we have to understand. So this question of the relationship between nature and culture would be helpful to enter the vast field of eco-criticism. There are many doors or many gates through which you can enter the vast area of eco-criticism, but this gate, that is nature versus culture, uh, by exploring the relationship between nature and culture, you can do something fruitful in your research if you happen to work on eco-criticism. Okay, so there is a picture. So can you move to one of the subsequent slides where that's nature versus culture. So this is how I would try to feature the contrast between nature on the one hand and culture on the other hand. This is not an offline session, so I would like to interact with the audience, but I don't think it's possible now. So let me answer myself. On the right, you find a picture, okay, a wilderness, a shrub, and it's not something good looking. Whereas on the left, you find a beautiful scenery. Am I right? The picture on the right, the beautiful scenery, it's pleasant to our eyes. It's appealing. It's green, in fact, but it is not at all green. Okay, it's a tea garden, but this is a perfect example of culture, actually. And these tea plantations are not the native plants of these these hills or the Western Ghats. Originally, before they were replaced, the mountain sides were populated with many native trees, tall trees and shrubs. But this was introduced during the time of colonization. Most of you know. Though it is enchanting to our eyes, it is not green at all because it's only a commercial crop. It is not environmentally friendly. In fact, it is environmentally harmful. It appeals to our eyes. We tend to be taken away by the appearance. But in reality, it is not something good. In fact, it is threatening because no species can find a habitat in a tea garden. Okay, no, even not an insect can survive there in a tea garden. It invades the entire region. It does not accommodate biodiversity at all. So it is not environmentally friendly as well. So this is what culture. Okay, culture is represented by this one. Whereas on the left, you find a picture. It's not quite appealing. Okay, because we would like to prefer to the picture on the right rather than the picture on the left because it looks ugly or somewhat dismal to our eyes. But the thing is, it is a perfect place where we can find biodiversity. It's a perfect example of a natural setup or a natural scene. Okay, you find a variety of shrubs, bushes, and trees where a number of species can find shelter. So this is an environment rich in biodiversity, but it doesn't appeal to our eyes. So this is how nature is. Whereas culture, nature is wilderness, culture is garden. Okay, nature is there without the intervention of humanity or human hand, whereas culture is something which has been intervened by humanity. So I hope this picture will help you understand that we have to change our attitude towards nature and culture. Culture is good, but we have to understand how so many things which are not proper have been injected into our belief system in the name of culture. Okay, so in one of the poems, I think it's Kubla Khan, the author, Coleridge, refers to a savage beauty. I just remember this phrase, savage beauty. He is referring to the place which he is describing in the poem. All of a sudden, he calls it savage beauty, S-A-V-A-G-E. you understand, savage immediately recalls to our mind somebody uncivilized, uneducated, uncultured. It is not so. Savage is original. Savage is natural. Savage is a place where human intervention has not taken place. Okay, human culture has not influenced. That's the place which he is describing in the poem. Okay, so culture, though it seems to be beautiful, it seems to be okay, appealing to our senses, there is a potential danger behind it. Okay, what we see by appearance may not always be good, but nature, on the other hand, though it is not appealing, not good looking to our eyes, because we are trained by culture that way, it is a real thing which we have to seek for. Okay, so if we apply these to our everyday life, we can come to know the things which we are practicing unconsciously. So if you apply what we have understood through our discussion, the difference between culture and nature, then we can understand how we are practicing so many things unconsciously. For example, we tend to disregard somebody who is from the rustic side. If somebody is educated, if somebody is good looking, if somebody is okay, somebody speaks English for that matter, if somebody is clad in okay, better clothings, then we tend to regard that he's educated, cultured, civilized, not knowing what his intentions are. Whereas a person who looks very simple, who is okay, who looks rustic, might be a person with humane tenderness. Okay, but the culture that we have inherited makes a false distinction between the rural on the one hand and the urban on the other hand. Likewise, you can make a series of distinctions how we are influenced by, or we have accumulated the influence of culture over these years. So I think I can stop here, though abruptly. I think I have done at least a partial justice to the topic which I have chosen for discussion. And if you want, I would wait for taking questions from. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much, sir. So thank you very much, sir. So this plenary session 3 on eco-criticism has well established the basic premise of culture and nature, and it has demystified, nature. It has demystified eco-literature and criticism, eco-criticism. So it was very clear and precise and exact. So you have touched upon the fundamental, arguments of eco-criticism, and you have made it to the audience very clear. So you have set right the foundation of eco-criticism in your lecture. So I think those who are not introduced to eco-criticism must have found it very elated. They must have found it very delighted to have heard you, and you have established what is green studies, what is eco-criticism, how nature versus culture are, and how critically important the eco-criticism for humanity. Okay, we have also dichotomized reality versus perception, and what we believe in reality, whereas our sense of understanding is different, what we perceive is different, and what the world outside is different. So all these things has really would have helped the audience of this conference, and you established the antithetical nature of culture and nature, and apart from that you have also contextualized the importance of eco-critical studies, and you have also contrasted nature versus culture, how man has intervened nature. So thank you very much, sir, for a very incisively, as well as a very clear-cut lecture on eco-criticism. Now, due to paucity of time, we may not take a lot of questions. We may take one or two questions. So, audience, please, if you have any question, please ask Professor Karthik Kumar, sir. Thank you.
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Uh, sir, this
Yes,
is
ma'am.
Gajalakshmi. I would like to just post one question to you, sir. In this pandemic situation, when you were talking with the nature concerns, I think so, because of the things which we have treated to the nature, nature is giving us back. Is this version right?
You are, I think you are partially right. So the first thing that we should know is that we are also part of nature. When we
Yes.
when we think that we are doing something to nature, we are doing to ourselves, no? So nature surrounds us,
Yes.
nature contains us. Actually, we are wrapped up in nature, but it is our modern within quotes, modern education that has taught us that we are other than nature. Actually, we are also part of nature. When we do something to the environment, we are doing it to ourselves. Naturally, we have to face the consequences. You are right.
Thank you, sir. So during this pandemic situation, this kind of a thing which was spoke about nature, I really
Yeah.
felt that this is the right context. Like we should, because you were speaking much of things with the first intro where between the culture and nature, which you were giving, really was impressed, and where in which we connect this. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks a
Great.
lot.
Actually, I have given a book, Forest, The Forest by Robert Higginson, which will help you gain more insight into this aspect.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there any other question?
Hello, good afternoon, sir. This is Gomati from SRM University.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You
Can you
ask your
hear me?
question.
Yeah, yes, sir. I have a question to ask. Could you tell me in what way nature affects the characters which have been appeared in the novels or fictions?
Okay. Actually, there are many ways. The characters are actually the creations of the author. One thing. Sometimes the author chooses to create his characters on the basis of the real time characters. During these 2 or 3 centuries, we have slowly come away from nature. We have come to call ourselves cultured or civilized without knowing what we actually mean by civilized or cultured. We are supposed to be civil rather than civilized, right? And though we think that we are anti-colonial or post-colonial, we're also the colonialists or the colonizers. As far as our terms of relationship with nature is concerned, we tend to overpower or dominate nature. So these are reflected in the characters. Okay, these are reflected not only through characterization, through other parts. Actually, one thing which the eco critics try to point out is that we tend to use nature as the setting. The setting was the background of the human action, but this is time for them to foreground what was supposed to be the background. So we have to reverse, okay, everything. Actually, we thought that the background, the nature was the background or the setting, but they have come to tell us that it is actually we have to foreground the setting, and we have to analyze how the relationship is portrayed between the human characters on the one hand and what was supposed to be the background or the natural setting on the other hand. So, in a number of ways, there are some works which are apparently written with environmental consciousness in order to create an awareness of the environmental consciousness. But there are any work for that matter can be read or can be studied from the environmental point of view. Every author, knowingly or unknowingly, has presented his or her attitude towards the natural world in the work. So nature is something which we cannot escape. So in many ways we can apply eco-criticism or eco-studies to the interpretation of literary works.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now, I think we have come to the end of the third plenary session, the last plenary session, and it is over to Master of Ceremonies, Professor Shafiq Pasha.
Yes, sir. So I thank Dr. Karthik Kumar sir, I thank Dr. Muhammad Ali sir, and all the other participants for posing very relevant questions. So we'll have to break for lunch now, and at 1:50 p.m., participants presenting papers are requested to join their respective rooms using the corresponding Google Meet links sent in the WhatsApp group recently. Please find the document there to get the links. The links are given in the document. Please find the document in the WhatsApp group. Kindly note that after the paper presentations are over, everyone is requested to rejoin through this same link for the feedback session at 4 p.m. So at 4 p.m., using this very same link, you'll all have to rejoin for the feedback session. Hope it is clear. Yes, thank you very much. We can close the call now.